Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about the server optimization and why the servers are running so poorly, and maybe give you guys a little bit of an explanation of how NC West and NC Soft, how they work together on the development of the game. So one misconception that I want to clear up right off the bat is that NC West does not have a development team in-house. So the way that development works for Blade & Soul is that the game is developed in Korea. So this includes every single region. This includes the Chinese server, the Japanese server, the Vietnamese server, and of course the NA and EU servers. All of these regions' development teams are all from Korea. The only thing that NC West can do is they take player feedback, for example, such as events, such as poor optimization, such as issues and problems, and they forward it towards Korea's development team. And they tell NC Soft in Korea, they tell the development team, look, we're having some huge optimization issues, we're getting some really big FPS drops, especially on Eternity Temple Boss 1, and they show them video footage, and then they try to figure out what's causing the issue. So the development team in Korea, the game works perfectly fine for them. But the reason why the game works perfectly fine for them in Korea is because Korea's a relatively small country and their infrastructure is very well made. So even though the game is poorly optimized netcode wise, it doesn't really matter because of the small distance that they have to cover in Korea, and on top of that they have very good infrastructure. So they have fiber optics, their internet's very fast, and it doesn't have to go very far because this Korean server is exclusive for Korea. While NC West, on the other hand, is catered to the global market. So you've got the EU and you've got NA. However, it's not exclusive to NA players only, not exclusive to EU players, and the infrastructure for EU and NA is so much larger, the geographic is so much larger that it's very normal to have very bad netcode because the source material originally had bad netcode to begin with. So by increasing the distance, by catering to other players who are overseas, who are very far away and don't have very good infrastructure, very fast internet, it's only going to amplify and really show the flaws of the game, of the netcode. So that is one of the reasons why Blade & Soul is very ping reliant, is because it works perfectly fine in Korea. The game was designed in Korea and for Koreans, and then we slowly adapted it into the other regions. However, unfortunately for the NA server and the EU server, it's got to cover a lot more ground because it's quote-unquote the global server, and that's why we have very poor netcode issues. However, circling back to how the development team is all in Korea, each region, such as the Vietnamese server, such as the Japanese server, they all have their own development team. However, their own development team is located in Korea. They have their own team which is responsible for each region. So for example, for NC West on the NA and EU server, they have an English-speaking team based in Korea which is in charge of this. So NC West in America or in EU will send feedback to this team. This team in Korea will take the feedback, translate it, and then talk with NC Soft's development team and see what they can do on balancing and readjusting things. So a very good example would be this recent event, the Hey Mujin's event. On Korea, it was fine for them because they had a lot of gear, ping's not an issue, everyone's average DPS is very, very high. And the reason for this is because everyone who plays on Korea has low ping, the game is relatively well optimized in Korea, and so they don't have all these issues that we have on the NA server. However, on the NA server and on the EU server, it's a totally different story because they've got players like myself who play from China all the way to the NA server. There's a lot of distance to cover from that. So the lowest ping that I'm ever going to be able to get in game is going to be around 280, 250 maybe if I'm lucky. However, at the end of the day, that is going to be a delay and is going to reduce my attack speed and thus directly affecting my DPS. And since NC West is catering towards the global market, there's a lot of people who have a lot lower DPS than players in Korea, not because of their gear, but because of the poor netcode and because of delay and because of all the other issues, which is causing the average player to deal less damage than what they should be dealing. And thus we needed those nerfs. So NC West talked with NC Soft in Korea. They said, hey, we need some changes here. What can we do to make this event more accessible to our player base? And then they tested a lot of things. So how do they test things? So they test things by developing everything in Korea first, and they test it in Korea on their own test server. If it works perfectly fine for them, then they send the test server data or the patch file to NC West, who is in America or in Europe. Then NC West will test it on their own test server, and then they'll see if they feel the changes are suitable or not. If they are suitable, then they upload the file onto the live servers, which then we, as the players, we download it from the client, and then we patch our game and we're able to play it on the live servers. So there's a lot of variables that can go wrong here. Obviously, when Korea tests it, they have 0 ping because it's on their local area network and they're just tweaking numbers, they're tweaking things. So the chances of them catching anything wrong is relatively low. So they're just going to test it. They're going to be like, okay, this is fine. And then they're going to send it over to NC West, which is in America. NC West in the West is going to download it onto their own test server. They're going to test it themselves just to see if the numbers are right. Just to see if everything's working correctly. And normally everything's going to work perfectly fine because, again, it's on their local area network. So there's 0 ping basically. They're going to test it and then they patch it onto the live servers if they feel everything is balanced, everything is fixed. Then on the live servers, this is where all the hiccups come in, because when they transfer the files onto the live servers, a lot of people are going to be downloading it and a lot of people are going to be testing it, and there's a lot of different variables, such as if I'm testing it on my computer, while if I tested it on my laptop, I'm going to get 2 different results, mainly because the specs on my laptop is not as powerful as my desktop. That is one factor. The second factor is my location. Maybe I'm on a wired connection. Maybe I'm on Wi-Fi. Maybe my brother decides to start downloading 10 gigabytes of movies while I'm testing stuff. Then obviously my ping's going to go up as well. And so there's a lot of variables which NC West and NC Soft are not really able to test until they go onto the live servers. So once the patch goes live on the live servers, it's really up to us, the player base, to give NC West the feedback to let them know, hey, this is broken, hey, this has bugs, hey, we need some fixes on these things. And only by telling them on either the forums or on Discord or on Reddit, only then can they spend resources to find out what the problem is or what's causing the issue, which then they forward again to NC Soft in Korea, the development team there, and say, hey, listen, we got some issues over here. Eternity Temple Boss 1, it shouldn't be dropping down to 5 frames per second. There's some optimization issues here, there's some frame drops issues. And then the team in Korea will look at this problem and be like, oh wow, that really is an issue. I wonder what happened. Why is this happening on the NA server and not on the Korean servers? And then they need to troubleshoot it and patch it out. And that is the process on how patches work for NC West and for the other regions as well. However, there are some issues on NC West which I do not have an answer for, and I really don't know why. And the main question that I have for NC West is, why is our optimization, like just frames per second performance wise, why does it perform so poorly compared to the Eastern servers? So when I play on the Chinese server, I have pretty good frames. I've played on the Japanese server, I also have very good frames. However, the moment I come onto the NA server, I'm in the exact same dungeon, exact same class, exact same party composition, but the frames per second that I get is 20 to 30 less than what I would get on the Eastern servers. So that is one thing that I'm quite confused about, because the development team for each region work in the same office in Korea. So the optimization or the general patches should be the same for each region. The only thing they're changing is they're changing what each item does. So for example, on the NA server, we use pet packs to upgrade our pet aura. However, on the Chinese server, it's got the exact same picture, however the name is not pet pack, because this is used for something totally different on the Chinese server. And then you go to the Vietnamese server and it's a totally different thing there as well, and the Japanese server has a totally different use of this item. So the icon is exactly the same, but the use is totally different. So each region has the same assets, but the names obviously and the language is translated differently. So if we're on the Chinese server, everything is in simplified Chinese. If we're on the Taiwanese server, everything is traditional Chinese. And if we're on the English server, everything is English. However, what I really don't understand is, why is optimization so much worse on the NA server? A lot of people have been telling me that it has something to do with the text and the translations, And this may be the case because we did have to download every single language. So what I'm thinking is maybe because the Taiwanese server and the Chinese server, we only have one language. We have traditional Chinese or simplified Chinese, depending on what region you play on. And if you look at all the other regions, we only have one language. Korean servers, it's in Korean. The Japanese servers in Japanese. Chinese servers in Chinese. Vietnamese servers in Vietnamese. And it's very simple. It's just one language, one client, done. But for NC West, we have a lot of different languages. So even though I play on the NA server and the majority of the population just plays the game in English on the NA server, however, we still have to download all the different languages. If you remember when the NC Launcher 2 came out, it increased our download size by like 20 gigabytes because we had to download every single language. So it might be because there's so many more different languages now, and that's bogging down the system. However, there is one thing that I'm certain for on why optimization is not good, and that is because of hidden assets. What do I mean by hidden assets? So when you go into a loading screen, when you're in that loading screen, your computer is loading up all these assets, loading up all these things in order for your monitor to show you what has loaded, everything, such as my attacks. You know, when I call my cat over there, that is an animation that needs to be loaded. Another asset that needs to be loaded is this background over here, or these rocks over here. These are all assets. So one of the main things that have been causing us a lot of issues is Mushin's Tower. And if you guys do follow a little bit of Reddit, there was a screenshot that showed you that there are a lot of hidden NPCs under Mushin's Tower. So even though they are hidden and we don't see them, when we teleport into Mushin's Tower, during our loading screen, we are still loading all of those hidden assets. Even though we don't see it and we don't use it, it's still eating up CPU usage, RAM usage, GPU usage, and it's just bogging down the system because it has to load them. Because if you don't load certain assets, you're just going to get an error message and your game's going to crash. So that is one issue that they did in Mushin's Tower, and it got even worse recently because they decided to move all the NPCs into Mushin's Tower. So if we go to Mushin's Tower right now, you'll notice that they added all of these NPCs. So the Peach NPC, the Weapon Merchant, Outfit Merchant, another merchant, and another merchant. So they added like 6 to 7 different merchants over here, which means there are more assets that need to be loaded. And because of that, it really bogs down the system, especially when you go to Mushin's Towers. There's already a ton of players there that like to AFK at Mushin's Tower, but on top of that, we have to load a bunch more NPCs, and each NPC sells a different list of items, and it has to load each of those items as well and all of those assets. And because of that, it really bogs down the system. However, that's not all. This has also been an issue on the Korean server and the Chinese server for quite a while. Whenever you went to SK or Scion's Keep, if you fight the Iron Conqueror, if you glitch your game by pulling the max distance more than what the game allows, and you look underground, you'll notice that there are 2 Iron Conquerors. So these 2 Iron Conquerors are actually mirroring each other's attacks, which is using unnecessary CPU usage, GPU usage, and RAM usage, which is causing our computers to lag. However, on the Korean server and the Chinese server, they soon fixed it by removing the model completely. However, on the NA server, the model is still there. However, it's just T-posing. So they took away the animations, but the model is still there. So that still is eating up, you know, unnecessary amounts of CPU and GPU usage because you still have to load 2 Iron Conqueror models instead of just 1. And there's just a lot of maps that have this issue. So for Eternity Temple, one of the bigger issues was on your first pull on the first boss of Eternity Temple, it usually runs fine because you haven't spawned that many crystals. However, during the burn phase, you'll notice that there are a lot of crystals spawning on the ground because you're constantly doing the mechanic, and then the game just starts lagging and gets laggier and laggier, and sometimes you get mini stutters and lockups where you just can't do anything. Your screen's frozen for like half a second to 1 full second. And the reason of that is because it's constantly spawning all of these crystals, and these crystals in the game's data, they don't despawn. So the mechanic in Eternity Temple Boss 1 is you spawn these little crystals, and the ball driver takes this ball, drives it into the crystals where it eats all the crystals in order to make the ball big, and then you drive the ball into the boss to deal mech damage. It's relatively simple. However, the issue with the game is even though we don't see the crystals anymore, the crystals are technically still there in the system. So the game doesn't despawn the crystals from the game. The assets and everything is still loaded there. They just made it invisible by putting it underground or just making it transparent and just making it not visible to us, the player. However, your computer is still loading all those assets, which is why the longer that fight goes, especially during burn phase, the laggier it gets, the worse it gets. So even though you can use a lot of mods in BNS Buddy, you can hide the crystals entirely, you can hide a lot of animations, you can disable stuff, it's still loading a lot of these things to an extent. Your CPU is still loading a lot of these things. However, on the bright side is your GPU doesn't have to load all of them. So it lessens the load on your graphics card. However, the load on your CPU is still going to be there. It's just going to be lessened by a little bit, which is why we really need optimization. So I know a lot of us are really sick and tired of waiting for Unreal Engine 4, and we've made tons of memes about it. But the reason why Unreal Engine 4 is taking so long is because the development team in Korea is literally just starting from scratch, because they can't quote unquote repair the game right now. When this game was released back in 2012, we didn't have such powerful multi-core threading. The game was designed for a single core, however, with very high clock speeds. However, nowadays, if you look at well-optimized games, it really utilizes the power of multi-core CPUs. So in order to get Blade & Soul onto an Unreal Engine 4 system, they kind of need to fix everything. They need to fix the netcode, they need to fix the multi-core threading, they need to fix the performance issues, and the only thing that they can really take from the game are the animations as well as the assets. So everything that's been drawn in the game, they can take back and just port it over to Unreal Engine 4. All the animations, so like the Kung Fu Master fighting, the summoners, all of our existing animations, they can take that and port it into Unreal Engine 4. However, there's still a lot of issues behind this, such as the netcode. We don't know how they're going to be changing the netcode. However, we do know that they're trying their hardest in order to try to fix the netcode to make it better, as well as the performance issues. They're trying to optimize the game to make it so that it's more streamlined, more optimized. And this is where Blade & Soul Mobile comes in, because mobile devices are not as strong as our PCs by a long shot. However, if they're able to port Blade & Soul onto the mobile phone, and people are able to play Blade & Soul on the mobile phone without any performance drops, that means they've done their job. They've optimized the game, they've fixed a lot of performance issues in order to run a game on a mobile phone, because the mobile phone is clearly not as powerful as the PC. So if it can run on a mobile phone and they port that over onto a computer and they just optimized it and made and upscaled everything and made everything look nicer, it would definitely help a ton in our performance. So the mobile phone thing with Blade & Soul was more of a test run for NCSoft, but on top of that, it was a win-win situation, because mobile games is a very big deal in the Asia market. So a lot of players, especially in China, we don't really play PC games all that much. The only PC games that a lot of us play are really just esports games. So like League of Legends, Overwatch, Counter-Strike, stuff that you'll see in the esports scene, mainly because a lot of people want to get good, they want to be professionals, they want to get paid to play video games. However, the average player or the average gamer here, most of us actually play mobile games, because mobile games are just more convenient. You can play it when you're on your transit to getting to work, or when you're coming back from work. You can even play during your breaks at work, and it's just more convenient for the everyday person. However, computer games or PC games is a lot more immobile, because you come back from work, you're exhausted, you sit down, and then, like, especially for MMOs, you have to commit a lot of your free time to sit down, and you need to allocate like 2 to 3 hours if you want to do a raid. And a lot of people don't have that commitment and don't have that time. So PC games are not as popular in Asia. However, mobile games are. So if you look at last year's statistics, I think it was like 40% of all gaming revenue was made from the mobile market. So obviously NCSoft is not stupid. They want to make money, however they also need to test this system. So what's the best idea? To put it on mobile and to put it out in the market and let the players test it and let them give them feedback and see how it is. And so far, the feedback for Blade & Soul on mobile has been very positive, because the game runs perfectly fine on the mobile device. We're running on stable 30 frames per second, and if you have a newer phone, such as like the newest iPhone or the newest Samsung, you can bump it up to 60 FPS and you can play on that, which is also very, very nice. And it's stable too. And not only were they able to test that, they were also able to test the netcode. Because when you're playing on a mobile device, you're playing on a 4G network. And on a 4G network, you're constantly moving around and you might disconnect for a couple seconds. And so they had to cater that around within their netcode for the mobile device as well. So NC West is able to take this data and use it in order to help them troubleshoot as well as remake the new netcode, which will be implemented alongside with Unreal Engine 4. So it's a very, very big project with a ton of different variables in it, which is why Unreal Engine 4 is taking such a long time in order to make. However, NCSoft is not stupid. They know that Unreal Engine 4, especially for the players in the West, is really their last chance. If Unreal Engine 4 doesn't work out in the West, they know that the Western market is probably going to collapse and the player base is probably going to leave Blade and Soul and move on to other games. As much as we all love Blade and Soul, you know, we can only put up with so much crap before people get tired, people get frustrated, and we just straight up drop the game. Because there are so many other games out there, there's so many other competitors out there which also want the slice of that pie. They want our money, they want our time, they want us to invest our time into their games. So there's a lot of competition going on. However, luckily for Blade and Soul, their combat just feels so fluid, so good. And luckily, so far there haven't been any competitors which have been able to mimic or been able to copy the Blade and Soul style, the Blade and Soul combat. However, one day that will definitely happen, and NCSoft knows that. So what they're trying to do now is quickly fix the issues as fast as they can and try to make it well and make it optimized. And even though they have delayed Unreal Engine 4 back till next year for us in the West, I feel like it's not a bad thing. I would rather have them delay it in order to make sure that when Unreal Engine 4 does come into the West, that it is perfect. It has to be perfect. If it's not perfect, a lot of people are going to complain and it's going to be the last straw for a lot of players. It's just going to be like, I'm done with the game. Goodbye. It's going to be like that. So NC West understands this. NC West has given NCSoft this understanding, this feedback saying, hey, we really need to nail this patch. And then NCSoft took the feedback, understood it, digested it, and they're trying their best in order to make it work. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight, a little bit more understanding on what goes on behind the scenes. So I personally am not a video game designer, guys. I run a restaurant, okay? I'm a restaurant owner. I know how to deal with angry clients. I'm good with PR. I'm good with stuff like this, but I don't know the ins and outs of netcode. I don't know the ins and outs of how games are developed. I don't know coding. I don't know any of these things. However, I do understand what goes on in a corporate level on why certain changes are taking so long and why certain bugs and certain things happen. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to do their job well. Everyone wants to get the job done. Everyone wants to fix everything and have a perfect game. But unfortunately, it's not a perfect world, and there's always going to be a small hiccup here or there. Unfortunately for us, it was a very big hiccup, especially with the last patch that came in. We got huge performance issues, and all I can say is really thank you to the community. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for all the feedback you've been giving NC West. But do be a little bit nicer to them, you know, because they do not have the ability to fix the issues that we have. The best they can do is to take the feedback that we give them, make it into a proposal into the format that NC West wants it, and then give them the feedback. And then the development team in Korea will look at the feedback and try to tweak the numbers, try to fix the issues, and try to fix the problem. So NC West doesn't have the authority, doesn't have the power to fix a lot of the issues that we have. All they can do is forward the issue, forward the problems to the development team in Korea or to NCSoft. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about in today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate a subscribe, as it really does help out my channel, and maybe share this with your friend to let them understand on what goes on behind the scenes. But as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
What can